Horizon, the future of a world not driven by innovation, but destruction. The aftermath of a robotic uprising, Horizon allows us as players to experience the spectacle of man versus machine in a reality that may not be so distant from our own future. A tale of mystery, a fluid and smooth combat system, and a deep dive into humanity's everlasting effect on our planet. These are just a few reasons why Horizon was able to solidify itself as one of Sony's strongest exclusive titles in recent years. With the latest installment to the franchise, Forbidden West, being out for almost a year now, and with the new Burning Shores DLC on the horizon, we over here at Playing Favorites would like to do a deep dive of our own and see how the game thematically changed and how those changes are represented through every aspect of the game. The combat, the dialogue, the main character. I believe that almost every part of Forbidden West reflects this thematic change in some way or another. We won't be doing a comparison, so to speak. Rather, we'll be looking at how the game's themes, main character, and internal mechanics developed or changed. Ultimately, this is an opinion piece, and we will have to compare the two different games in one way or another, but at the end of the day, they're both Horizon, and we recommend you play them both. So come join us as we discuss the good, the bad, and the Forbidden West. Before we get into this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to get notified whenever we upload a new video. I know that Bucky's working on a God of War video that should be up within the next few days, so make sure to look out for that. When Horizon was announced in 2015, it took the gaming world by storm. Not only was it Guerrilla Games' first IP in over 10 years, with Killzone being the prior, but it also came at a time where the appeal for detective mode style games were beginning to hit a decline. The formula was just getting stale. I was personally skeptical all those years ago, and didn't see much potential from what footage I had seen up until that point. Oh boy, was I wrong. Not about the detective mode thing, those are getting really old. What I was wrong about was how the devs at Guerrilla Games were able to take this, dare I say, aging formula, and turn it into their own, making it feel really unique. Since we're talking about detective mode, let's use that as our first example. The focus given to us in the tutorial serves the gameplay function of solving puzzles, unlocking collectibles, and giving you a general sense of direction when you're lost or in a bind. But thematically, it serves a much greater purpose. Aloy is considered an outsider for keeping the device, and is shunned by her entire tribe for using it. Among other reasons. But the focus gives her access to, well, the internet. So she's a lot smarter, knowledgeable, and resourceful than her tribal peers. Reminiscent of the Arkham games, this subtle addition of lore to an otherwise standardized gameplay function is able to add a whole new layer of character development, as well as overall world building. The world building part is critical as we delve into our next section. One of Horizon's strongest characteristics is the environment. You're dropped into this lush, beautiful, but almost eerie world. A world so full of life, and yet so devoid of it at the same time. Machines roam around, each moving and interacting with the environment in their own unique ways. It almost feels natural. Yeah, if you couldn't tell the machines are supposed to be representing different animals, sorry if that shattered your brains. Back to the world building. These animal machines do exactly that. Make the world feel so much more alive and appealing to interact with. But more importantly, they also reinforce the story's main narrative. The wild is wild again. Society can't save you from the dangers Mother Nature throws at you, like ice skaters and thunder falcons. If we take a look at the different storytelling elements of the game, they all work to reinforce this. From the conversations with Nora and Karja to the more subtle things like runes and artifacts from the past scattered around the world. This isn't to say this is the only story Horizon aims to tell. The game is filled with politics, personal affairs, choices, the humans were the real bad guys all along trope that you see all the time. It's got the works. But what is unanimously linked between all the different storytelling elements is that apocalyptic narrative. You'd even be able to link this to the way the combat functions, timing precise shots between onslaughts of attack, trying to find that tiniest bit of order beneath the chaos. The limitations of using only a bow when your foe has... Does that tiger have a fucking machine gun? Well shit, if that doesn't scream apocalypse, I don't know what will. You might be thinking, gee, that sure is a lot for one Nora to handle. And you'd be right to think that. That's why our next section is about everyone's favorite archer. We decided to dedicate a whole section to Aloy herself, as we believe the main character of a story to be almost like a representative for the story as a whole. No development can ultimately happen without the protagonists developing themselves. Not to mention, I think Aloy's transition from Zero Dawn to Forbidden West to be very interesting, but we'll get to that in a bit. For now, let's talk about Aloy as she's introduced to us. We first see Aloy as a young child, but that's boring, so skip the tutorial. Now an adult, and having been shunned her whole life, Aloy starts as a curious yet guarded individual. Rightfully so. The nicest thing she got to this point was silence. I kid you not, there's a whole side quest about it. Both we as players, and Aloy as the Aloy, don't know why everyone hates her. So we try to prove ourselves at the proving, and go down a whole rabbit hole of lore that we really can't get into. What's important though, is the slow shift in tone Aloy has throughout the main story, where she changes from a person who's envious and almost resentful of the hardships she's been forced to endure, into a literal savior, ready to give her life for the same people who directly and systematically shunned her. Personally, a bit cliche for me, but it's done very well. Her development as a character is fluid, you end up sympathizing a lot with her beliefs and mentality as the game progresses. And let's be honest, who doesn't like a hero who saves the world in a non-controversial way? That's pretty much where Zero Dawn leaves us, with Aloy being the modest hero loved by all. With those three sections we discussed still in your minds, let's dive into how things changed as Aloy dives into the Forbidden West. At first glance, the games seem almost identical in terms of the core gameplay mechanics. But as you progress through the game, you begin to see how much more in-depth the system has become. Let's start with traversal. And for our first example, let's look at the focus that we talked about earlier. Due to how much bigger Forbidden West's map is compared to Zero Dawn, traversal is a key component to keeping the game fun, since that's something you'll be doing a lot of. In turn, they made a slight change to how the focus functions, which allows you to see climbable terrain that Aloy can reach, giving you clear climbing paths and completely free movement across the terrain. Well, almost. The issue is, if you climb up, how do you get down, right? Nobody wants to climb down. That's insane. Get the fuck out of here with your stupid ideas. No. How about a grapple? You can shimmy down real quick. Pull blue rocks, I guess? Plus, it makes climbing up big cliffs a breeze. Why not a glider, too? We've got this huge-ass world anyways. It seems like a shame to let the player only explore on foot. All completely new mechanics introduced to Forbidden West that all hit the mark on upping the ante in the gameplay. Everything is so much more satisfying to explore and traverse once you get access to these abilities. Speaking of upping the ante, let's talk about combat, my favorite part in any video game. I was one of the people who thought Zero Dawn's gameplay was pretty intuitive and fun to loop through. But it always left me wanting more from it. Using nothing but a bow does become a bit of a drag when you get to the endgame of Zero Dawn. But thank God for the combat system in Forbidden West. More weapons, more machines, bigger and better fighting arenas. This game nailed every mark. There's a lot more machines, but what I really appreciate is how unique they managed to make every one of these machines feel. In Zero Dawn, I did feel like some machines were just reskins or downgraded versions of others, like the Scrapper and the Ravager, for example. But in Forbidden West, each machine gets their fair share of the spotlight. And with bigger, scarier machines, comes more badass weapons. If you've played Forbidden West, but haven't gotten a chance to play around with all the weapons, I highly recommend it. Some of them are just crazy. I never thought I'd see Aloy using a handheld hwacha to pump rounds of arrows into her enemies. My personal favorite is the Shredder Gauntlet. Nothing is more satisfying than that combo explosion you get when you hit and catch the Shredder 4 times. Thematically, all of these little gameplay functions serve a purpose. One, to show you how vast the world really is, and how small your little circle was in comparison. And two, to show us how much the world has changed from what we once knew. From an introduction to new weapons and mechanics, to bigger machines, down to the people you meet and how they treat machines as opposed to the Karja and Nora that we meet in Zero Dawn. Everything works to reshape the world that we already knew. I think you already know what I'm going to talk about next. When you first enter the Forbidden West, you can tell the tone of the game immediately. Much bigger, prettier, and more lively. From the weather to the people, visually everything improved, and I don't think there's any denying that. But what we gained in visual appeal we lost in feel. Although the world's a lot bigger now, we lose that eerie tone that Zero Dawn sets so well. The world feels a lot less barren, and in turn, a lot less scary. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot to be scared of. Those slaughter spines aren't gonna feed themselves. Yes, you heard me right, there's a machine called a fucking slaughter spine. What purpose did this slaughter spine serve humanity before the slaughtering? But despite the scarier machines, seeing a lot more large villages, interacting with a lot more people, and seeing bandits actually tame machines like you do, does take away from the absolute dread you feel in Zero Dawn. That feeling might also just be because there's less mystery to the world as a whole. At this point, we know where the machines come from and what we need to do to stop it. In any case, beauty and variety does come at a cost. But that isn't to say Forbidden West world feels empty. That eerie space is replaced with a wide sense of wonder. Every landscape in this game is picture perfect. And I'm not just talking about visuals. There are just some sequences and moments that you can't get in any other game. It's a grandeur of nature that's very similar to Nintendo's Breath of the Wild. There's a lot more people to meet, a lot more factions and politics, but it all works to show you that your little bubble was just that, a small part of this much, much bigger place. You might be thinking, gee, that sure is a lot for one Nora to handle, and you'd be right to think that. That's why we're finally going to talk about. As I said before, I find Aloy's transition from Zero Dawn to Forbidden West to be very interesting as a character. Zero Dawn leaves us with Aloy being a hero, branded as the savior of Meridian, a title that she explains she never wanted. Although she does want to help people, she's always been an outcast. So being praised, thanked, and generally just accepting being treated nicely literally isn't in her coding. What I noticed was a recurring theme in both games, and how Aloy isn't really thought of as a person by other people. I know, that's a lot to say, but hear me out. In Zero Dawn, everyone shuns her for being an outcast, literally refusing to speak to her. By the end of Zero Dawn, she's praised as a hero, someone above the commoner, someone to be praised and worshipped. In both cases, that's never what Aloy wanted. She wanted to be left to her own devices and live amongst the people rather than feel like she has to run from them. That's unironically how Forbidden West starts, with Aloy running from a party that was thrown in her honor. And throughout the second game as a whole, we can really see how this image of savior that people see her in really affects her. She's overburdened with the world's expectations of her, most of which are in her own head, but in her heart she does want to save everyone. She just doesn't know if she can live up to that standard. As the climax inches closer and closer, Aloy loses touch with herself more and more, lashing out, questioning her resolve, and ultimately ends up hating the life that's been dealt to her. This is best represented in scenes between Aloy and whoops! Almost spoiled there. The point is, the crown of savior is a heavy one to bear, and Aloy's story as a whole is a bit darker because of that. We constantly see our favorite archer being pushed to her absolute limits in the Forbidden West. I really did appreciate that the writers took the time to add so much depth and development to this character. In conclusion, while Zero Dawn set the base for an interesting, mystery-driven atmosphere, Forbidden West takes what we once knew and elevates it, drawing in on Zero Dawn's biggest strengths while aiming to tell a new story, a story of a bigger, brighter world. And while the world's bigger than we once thought, it's also a lot more dangerous, and most importantly, more complicated. A peaceful world can't be found with a mere wish. It needs a will that pushes forward, being tested over and over again. There's a lot less black and white, and a lot more gray. A lot less right and wrong, and a lot more people just trying to be people. While Zero Dawn leaves us with an itching desire to solve the mystery of the world, Forbidden West shows us that the world of Horizon itself is far more interesting. From the people, their dynamics and politics, to the machines and their newfound purposes within the world. Everything works to expand on the setting of the franchise rather than dwell on its past. And for better or for worse, Forbidden West is thematically a different game for it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and hit that bell to get notified whenever we come up with a new video. Also, leave a comment telling us what we should do next. We'd love to hear your ideas. Once again, thanks for watching. I hope to see you guys in the future.